Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et hora mortis nostrae. Amen.
Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Brethren in Christ, laudetur Jesus Christus.
In secula.
This is Timothy Flanders with the meaning of Catholic. Jesus is King. Welcome to the Monday Morning Man Show. It's Terror of Demons, Reclaiming Traditional Catholic Masculinity with co-host Kennedy Hall, the author of the book, and Jake Fowler. Welcome, everyone, to the second week after Pentecost. It is the time after Pentecost. That's right. Not ordinary time. I don't believe in ordinary time. I call it extraordinary time. Anyways, it's technically tempus per annum in Latin, but they thought it would be great to call it ordinary time, which was a disaster. But it's actually time after Pentecost, and it's a great time to work on your spiritual life, having gone through all the mysteries of the faith through Lent and Easter. Let's see what we got this week. Pull out the calendar because I don't have my liturgy at the home here. This week we have some excellent feasts because we have St. Aloysius Gonzaga tomorrow. This Friday is the Feast of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. We're still in the octave of Corpus Christi, so you still have great opportunities to offer reparation of the Blessed Sacrament, to join the Crusade of Eucharistic Reparation, which we're promoting at 1 Peter 5, which is just a monthly holy hour in reparation to the Blessed Sacrament. And there's reparation at the Sacred Heart of Jesus on the Friday after the octave of Corpus Christi. And then on Saturday, the Feast of St. John the Baptist is transferred. It's a great day to have a bonfire because you can bless the bonfire. I think there's a blessing that a layman can do. I'll have to look it up. But you have a bonfire because it's the summer solstice. So from here on out, the light gets less and less and less and less until it's dark, until it's Christmas, when the light of Christ shines, because St. John said, he must increase, I must decrease. So this Saturday, have a bonfire in honor of St. John the Baptist. So let's see. Jake Fowler, you got a new show coming out this week?
Yeah, it should be tomorrow morning. I don't remember what part we're on, 18, 19, something like that. But we're right at Nicaea 2. So the church is about to crush the iconoclast heresy, and it will have next to no effect on the actual heretics, as is expected. They're like, hey, you can't do that anymore. And they're like, okay, got it. Break those statues. No, and it takes like another 60 years for it to go away. So this is just the saga, the church says one thing, people are going to do what they want to do.
And do you see parallels with the iconoclasm of the Protestants, the Protestant revolt, and then the iconoclasm of the 20th century when people were using hammers against statues, but they happened to be Catholic priests doing that?
I mean, in a sense, yes and no, because I don't think I could be wrong here. I would hate to think that those priests were destroying the statues because they believed it was idolatry. Right? I think they were doing it for a much worse reason, which was like out with the old, in with the new. It'd be more understandable if they thought this is a sin.
Right, that's true. That'd be more convicted. It's true.
If they believe like, hey, we can't do this anymore. This is a sin versus, this is kind of ugly, or the church just needs to update. Then that's a terrible reason. But definitely with the Protestants, because they did believe it was idolatry. But I think taking a step further back, even you can see that the effects that councils have and church definitions and doctrines and all that stuff, it takes a long time for it to be believed to the level of practicality, right? In each new generation. Not to say the church hadn't believed it before, but in 50 years, the people being catechized today, like the 9 and 10-year-olds, they're going to be the bishops. They'll be 60, 70 years old, So whatever faith we're handing them today is going to be implemented 6 decades from now. And so that's why it takes a while in church history, Nicaea 2 says one thing, and it's not until the 840s that iconoclasm actually goes away. Something like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of generational passing down, and the definition is hammered out and polished, and it's also got to be rock solid to be able to be passed down.
Right.
Nicaea 2 has the great anathema: whoever rejects any unwritten ecclesiastical tradition, let him be anathema.
Right. It's a nice catch-all.
Yeah, it's a great catch-all. Yeah. Because an ecclesiastical
by the way,
tradition is not even a high tradition. An ecclesiastical tradition is like your vestments or something rather low on the scale of binding authority.
Sure.
It's not like the scripture. It's like something really low. So somebody who rejects these really low traditions that aren't that important, let him be anathema.
Right.
That's our attitude as Catholics. Kennedy, what's going on with TKR this week?
Oh, I don't have any idea yet because as you've gotten to know me over the years, Tim, I kind of fly by the seat of my pants with a lot of things. I was away on holidays last week and went camping and stuff and slept about 4 hours a night for that time. And
so not restful? Not a restful vacation?
It was recreation. I was recreated, but it isn't camping with my children, right? Like I brought my 4 kids and it was wonderful. There's something about the fresh air that restful, but I just haven't even thought about work. And now I'm just waking up to like 55 different emails on like 3 different email accounts, LifeSite, my TKR one, my personal one. So I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do, and then I'll let everybody know when I make that video. That's as far
Sweet. Yeah, everybody make sure you check out the Kennedy Report. It's a rising star channel, doing great, covering all the hot topics. And Kennedy covers the hot topics in the best way possible, which is
with maybe an accent.
With an accent. But it's actually, I hate covering the news, but if you have to cover the news, watch TKR, because
my goal is to I do some evergreen topics. Like I love me some Fulton Sheen. So what I mean by that is, I'll cover him. Like one of the videos I did that's doing pretty well right now is him on Pride Month. Like he didn't talk about Pride Month, but he talked about that rise of sexual liberation and all that, and about LGBT things particularly. So that's an evergreen topic because it's not like it's something that'll be relevant. It's not like, breaking news, something just happened. But then sometimes there are things that come up, and I see them obviously working at LifeSite. I mean, I'm seeing everything all day with, not just my stories, but we have like a pitch file, and everyone's seeing what everyone else is doing. And there's like, 20 journalists or whatever. There's lots going on. So, I thought, because the motto of the channel is making sense of the world through a Catholic perspective. I debated how to do the channel for a long time because I'm like, should I just be another voice out there with a Catholic podcast, just being another one of those? But I thought there was a niche or something in commenting on current affairs within the church, especially, but from a measured and not angry perspective. That was my goal. Not to say that people are angry, but personally, I just don't do well with the negativity. I can't stand it. It drives me nuts. So I figure everyone's going to talk about the stuff. Maybe I can offer the non-negative view. That's kind of what I've been doing.
Yeah, the non-negative view. I love it because you wrote this article for What Up Your 5 back in March. Trads don't consecrate your negativity for the consecration of Russia, which I thought was great. Very, very, very important and relevant. So go to Kennedy Report for the non-negative view of what's going on. Meaning of Catholic, if you want to join the guild community, we've got the online guild. We're about to launch our new website next month, God willing.
Oh, great.
We are formulating our constitutional documents And we just got our first YouTube censored video 2 weeks ago. So we have our badge of honor. Last week we had in our guild stream, we had family homesteading. That was a great show, talking about a lot of practicals about how to family homestead. So if you want to be a part of the guild, it's patreon.com/meaningofcatholic. And I'm sure that Paleocrat will throw a bunch of presuppositions at you this week. So tune into Paleocrat Diary.
We're presupposing that he will do that.
We are presupposing that, exactly. So without any further ado, let's dive into our topic. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord, says St. Paul. The woman should fear her husband, says St. Paul. What does St. Peter say? Women be like the women of old, and Sarah, who called her husband Lord. So these are all these passages in Scripture which are not. You don't really hear a lot of sermons about this. I'm not sure if did the Novus Ordo take any of these out. I know that the marriage rite used to have that Ephesians 5 passage, but the marriage rite can be optioned out now. So if you do hear these passages, you probably don't hear a sermon about them because they're often just skipped by the priest. But they are in Holy Scripture. So we're going to talk about Kennedy. Let's see. What chapter are we on, Kennedy? I think it's
probably chapter 7 is good.
Yeah. So Kennedy, tell us about wives, submit to your husbands.
Sure. Wow. Okay. So there's a couple different ways to talk about this. One of the classic things you always hear is, and this is true. So in Ephesians 5, I don't have my Bible in front of me, but talks about the man being the head of it actually says head of the wife, head of the woman. It doesn't actually say head of the household. That doesn't mean he's not head of the household. But the reason why it says head of the woman is actually more intimate than that. Obviously it's symbolic, in the sense he's not actually the head, because they're not, but it relates to the intimate nature where they become one flesh of marriage, of what it's supposed to mean. And as much as it represents obviously a headship in the literal sense, it also represents a dependency of both on one another, because obviously you can't cut off the head and still have the body, or cut off the body and still have the head. They literally need each other in order to be conscious and to be alive. There's the old expression, like the Italian ladies and the Greeks will say too, is man's the head, but the woman is the neck. She'll turn the head in whatever direction she needs it. But so it's a good analogy. It's a good metaphor for the differences between men and women as well, in a general sense. Women, generally speaking, tend to be more emotionally intelligent, if that makes sense, or more emotionally in tune, let's say, with the needs and emotions of others. It's a very natural trait for most women, especially when it comes to mothering and friendship. It's very useful. Whereas men tend to be a little bit more disconnected from the intimate emotions of a moment in order to think about things in a more, it's going to get me in trouble, but more rational sense, meaning not that women are irrational, but meaning in a strictly rational sense. And to define those terms real quick, like if I react to a situation because I'm excited or something like that, because there's an emotional reaction I have, I'm rational insofar as I'm making a decision, but I'm not as rational as I could be if I were to be unemotional about it. And men, generally speaking, tend to not be as emotional about certain situations. But that also can actually be a problem, because there are certain moments that require a more tender, involved emotional response for the sake of the person who's gone through some sort of trauma, which is why that man being the head relies also on the woman being the heart, okay, of the family. Anyway, so St. Paul says, he talks about women submit to your husbands, and then he also talks about submit to one another, which is the part that in the sort of Novus Ordo conservative world is totally okay to say, submit to each other. I remember one time sitting through a marriage conference thing that I was actually helping with, and a marriage prep, excuse me. And it was all about mutual submission. And it was like, because of mutual submission, sometimes I take turns leading. Sometimes he takes turns leading. And, there's this thing here that JP2 wrote. And so we're all like submitting to each other. And it's just awesome. It's like totally wicked, awesome submission time. And it was technically true in the sense of like, we submit to each other because both of us are, this is why we say our marriage vows in front of an altar, because marriage is a sacrifice. We bring it to God, and it's something that he immolates for us, and he immolates us in a sense by it because it sanctifies us. So yes, we are submitting to each other because we sanctify each other and are each other's cross in a sense. But let's call that the spiritual submission, if that makes sense. But then in an actual sense of the economy and the hierarchy of the home, it has been ordained since creation that man is the head of the human race. And that means those in his family. And there are very practical reasons for that. So in chapter 7, I have an explanation about why this is so important. And there's a little passage here that I talk about basically, why would we do this when the world says to live in a different way? And right, if you live by the rules of the world, you'll live by stupid rules. We live in a time of great material abundance, yet both men and women are increasingly unhappy. So-called sexual liberation has led to contraception, adultery, divorce, and destroying unborn children. A large rejection of the teachings of the Catholic Church has led to blind obedience to political correctness and the state. The average person thinks we have progressed, yet we can no longer handle basic human relationships like marriage. And that's one of the things that I wanted to hammer home. Marriage is like the oldest institution on earth. It should be the one that we're the best at. We've had the most practice at it, but we've completely rejected the natural order of male and female, and it screwed us both over. And we see that. And, it's funny, watching the people around me who are kind of living in a secular way. There's this weird inching, like as much as there is this feminist thing, there's this inching towards traditional marital roles as a reaction. And a lot of women and young men, they don't know how to conceptualize it, but they know they're supposed to do it. So I was talking to somebody who's like, I just want so-and-so to like be the leader of us. But like, we're equals, but like, you gotta be the leader. And we're like, oh, it's almost like religion or something. Well, no, not really. I was like, well, okay, sure. It's like, in the Bible, it says exactly what you're saying. Anyway, that's my opening spiel. Any comments on what I've said?
Yeah, Jake, what do you think?
Well, when you were talking, Kennedy, I was thinking of a conversation I had a few years ago with a guy about that passage in Ephesians 5. And we were talking to another man who at the time, I believe, was an agnostic or at the very least, a very weak theist. And I was explaining the traditional Catholic perspective, like male headship, wife submit to your husband, husband give up your life for your wife, and what does that family dynamic look like? And the other fellow, who was a Catholic, is a Catholic, I should say, said, I've heard that interpretation before, but I like my take on it is this. And I was thinking in my head, I should have called him out on it, but in hindsight, that may not have been very, very kind of me. But I was thinking in my head, you've heard this before, as in like for the last, couple of millennia, but you finally discovered the real answer. Why are we trying to it's like, oh yeah, I've heard that before, but check this out. I got the inside scoop on it. It's like, no, you don't. You've heard it before because that's what's been handed down. So just roll with that. There's nothing wrong with that. And when you explain it to people, right, I taught this when I taught marriage in my class for seniors last year, or the last 2 years. And when I roll out on the whiteboard or on the projector screen, wives submit to your husbands. I get all kinds of nasty looks, but then I come back and I'm like, well, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, husbands, give up your lives for your wives. All the ladies in the room, these are 17, 18-year-olds.
Yes.
They're like, ooh,
Yeah.
I want a guy like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I want that. The way you've explained it. And I said, yeah, that's the way God wants it too.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, this guy, nice man, great man, except for this one point, right? He's like, well, I think it should be more equal.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I, we have these separate checking accounts, and her money and my money, and our kids do this and that. And I'm like, do you take control at all of the things that go on in your home? Like,
Yeah.
It's just crucial to do that. Like you said, there's an equality of dignity there, right? I'm not trying to denigrate any women, least of all my wife. But there's not an equality of capability or role. And to recognize that it shouldn't make us, oh, these guys, they're ostracizing, they're so misogynist. It's just kind of normal. And we're willing to say what's normal. That's all.
Yeah, it's normal. I think that's a good way to say it. And like when you explain this to a young lady, as you said, they understand, because when we talk about headship, we're talking about Christian headship.
Yeah,
we're not talking about the headship of the world, as our Lord himself says. The Gentiles lorded over them. Mm-hmm. And so, and unfortunately, we have some trads who say wives submit to their husbands, and then they do that in a worldly way. And so that they think that means you kick back on the couch with a beer and just order your wife around. Well, you're being effeminate if that's your idea of headship. Headship is as Jake just said, is Christ dying on the cross for your bride. So if you're not dying on the cross for your bride, you're not worthy to be the head of your household. You have to be dying on the cross. That's headship. Putting everything, you're the headship means you are the servant of all. You are the last person who gets what he wants. You're striving to provide for your wife's needs and your children's needs. And if there's anything left over, you get the rest. That's
right.
what
Think about the papal title, servant of the servants of God. And think about, like, pick your favorite time in papal history when the Pope is just rocking it. And he's probably rocking it because he's serving, right? He's serving in a very authoritative manner. He's laying down the law. He's making this definition. He's, excommunicating this or that emperor or king. But he's serving the bride, the church, right? And that's when headship is at its best, right? You're not rejecting your God-given role and allowing your wife to usurp a God-given role and therefore reject hers, right? And here's another thing, and then I will yield the floor, I promise. When men and women each try to do the other, it's easier, right? How many wives do we know who don't just love to make all the decisions and have their husbands go along with it? We're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to go here and there, and I've set everything up, and sweetheart, it's going to be great. The woman wants to do that it's a temptation. And the male temptation is what? To sit on the couch with a beer, to just kind of kick back and relax and whatever you say, dear. Right? Kennedy, one of the first times I watched you on the interwebs, you said something like, happy wife, happy life is utter nonsense. And I was like, oh, I like this guy. I need to listen up. But that's the male temptation, right? I'll just be over here, whatever you think, sweetheart. Yeah. It's actually harder. It's more challenging to be the leader. And it's more challenging for the woman to be not the leader, to submit, right? To follow. Okay.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Rant over.
Well, I'll read a little bit of this chapter here because it's actually a pretty good book. I haven't read it in a long time.
Pick up your copy of Terror of Demons while supplies last. Operators are standing by.
No CODs. What does Charles Coulomb say? Act
Some
fast.
assembly required.
Some assembly required. Oh, I love that guy. Actually, it's funny. If Charles is listening, he's probably got better things to do. He's in like Europe and like Christendom. But when I took my kids camping, this is an example actually of how awesome being a dad can be. And anyway, we have a Father's Day camping tradition, and we talk to guys who are not, let's say, trying to live a good Catholic life, or I shouldn't judge, but you know what I'm saying in this general sense. It's like, you're taking kids camping on Father's Day. That's not as fun for dad. Because it's true, like camping with little kids is a lot of work. I mean, I took my 6-year-old, my 5-year-old, my 4-year-old, and my almost 3-year-old camping. There were lots of tears and things when they got really tired and couldn't have a nap. And they also had the best time of their life, but it's like, a toddler's camping. Like, there's going to be reasons. I want more s'mores. But there was like 6 or 7 dads there, and we, between us, there was like 30 kids there, and it was the best thing ever. And it's weird because it actually required a lot of work. But it was like the most satisfying way of having recreation. We were out there roughing it with the kids, and they were just playing. And like Titus caught a bunch of crayfish and got bit by one, and they played a bunch of basketball and baseball, and there's a lake. We went, all the kids were swimming in the lake. They all got little sunburns, and it was just a perfect little weekend. And we happened to drink a lot of beer. But in any case, here is in the book, I think encapsulates what we're trying to get to. So where to start here? Well, I use the analogy of think about a parish where there's a large female role. I have not been to the Novus Ordo. Actually, I had to sit at a Novus Ordo in the March for Life. That was an out of body experience, seeing that after a long time. It was very interesting. But I can't remember what it was like to be at like a regular parish with all the like readers and Eucharistic ministers and ladies doing the cantors, they sing the thing and like raise their hands, and it's like, your turn now. And I saw that for the first time in a long time, and I was like, whoa, forgot this existed. But it's just a fact that if there's like a female leadership at the church, it's probably a dying parish. That's just a legitimate, verifiable fact. Any parish where that's happening is not going to last. And I write here, I'm not blaming women per se, just as I'm not blaming men per se. But whoever is to blame, our homes and our parishes are in a state of disorder. It is not that women aren't capable of doing most things that men can do, and the opposite is also true. However, men and women were designed for a different purpose. Think for a moment about the most common professions for your average working woman. Most women work in nursing, education, human resources, and social services. I'll pause here. There are exceptions, but exceptions prove rules. It's like there are queens from the past who actually lead the country, especially if their husband dies or something. They become like Saint so-and-so, the queen who led the country in war. It proves the rule. That's what exceptions do. Saint Joan of Arc is an exception that proves the rule, and that's why it's so exceptional that she is Saint Joan of Arc. Okay, I talked to a woman the other day for LifeSite. She's running for the Conservative leadership of Canada. She would be an incredible prime minister. She's actually like an amazing woman. She's devout Christian. She's pro-life. She's a lawyer. I talked to her for a while. She actually has a really great home life somehow, and her husband made it work, and they seem like wonderful people, but she's an exception, and she exceptionally proves the rule. In any case, and I say, when women leave the home, they cannot help but seek a job in which they're mothering for a living. Now think about the most common professions for men. In most cases, you'll find men gravitating toward leadership positions or jobs that require technical skills, whether physical or mathematical. If you were to think of the most unhappy man on earth, I would imagine he works a sedentary job and has no opportunity to exercise leadership over anyone. Most likely, he does not show any leadership in the home either. Like most men, he has bought into the lie of equality. There is no equality between the sexes. cancellation of Kennedy Hall. This is not because each does not share equal dignity. And you know what? I'm going to pause there too. We also, is this kind of like, as conservatives, when we have to say, like, I'm not racist, when the left, brings it up, it's like, I'm done with that. Obviously, I think there's equal dignity. You know what I mean? Just because you think women and men are different doesn't mean you don't think they have like less inherent worth. That is kind of like how Marxists will use the term capitalism. It's like, you're a capitalist, and it's like, oh, shut up. I believe men and women have equal dignity because I'm not an evil person. That doesn't mean that men and women are the same. There is no equality because we are not equals. To be equal means to be the same, and men and women are not the same. Try to think of how you could show equality between men and women. Is there a way to do it without splitting things half and half between them? Would anyone say there is equality in a home if the husband works and the wife takes care of the home? Of course not. And then I'm talking in a general sense, a secular sense. The concept of egalitarianism is inherently evil because it is not how God ordained the relationship between the sexes. Man was made to have dominion and woman was made to help him. This does not demote a woman into a secondary role. Rather, it promotes man to a level of necessitating heroic responsibility. God created each of us with a nature, and in the same way, you cannot domesticate a wild animal. You cannot force men and women into equal roles. The results will be what they have been: divorce, perversion, sexual immorality, broken homes, and ultimately depression and suicide. In order to have this egalitarian view of marriage that we promote in our society, it has to begin with disorder. And that fundamental disorder that it begins with is contraception. For all other bodily functions, if you ingest food and then you expel it, it's called a disorder. And it's a very sad thing. And anyone who has that disorder deserves empathy, compassion, and needs help and friendship. But for some reason, if you perform the conjugal act and expel, et cetera, it's called contraception and safe sex. If somebody were to take a drug to stop the normal functioning of their body so that their body would act as if it was not healthy in a certain respect, that'd be a terrible thing to do, except when it comes to contraception. That's what hormonal contraception does. It makes the woman's body act in the opposite of how it's supposed to act at a certain time in the month. Hence, it leads to disorder. And ultimately, this push to give kids, and Jordan Peterson just put an article, I didn't read it yet, but he's getting a little bit more base day by day. And in the Telegraph, you can probably read it for free with Brave browser, by the way, that gets past the paywalls on things. And he put out a video called Butchers and Liars, talking about doctors who push gender transitioning on children. And it's the same logic as contraception. Puberty blockers, all that sort of stuff is the exact same medical illogicality as hormonal contraception. Because what you're saying is the body has a natural function towards a natural end. Again, there are exceptions, but those exceptions prove the rule. When someone has an infertility issue, it proves that fertility is the natural state. Okay? And this idea that you would take hormones in order to change the physiology of your female nature is no different in mentality than taking hormones to change the physiology of your female nature for a different purpose. It's just more severe in the one case, but both of them are both disordered. Okay? So in order to have this egalitarian society, we have to start with disorder. And it's the disorder of contraception. And this is why there are a whole host of reasons why it's wrong. But one of the reasons that it's really wrong is if you begin with disorder, then you will not have order after that. All you'll be doing is playing catch up, and you'll be trying, it's like whack-a-mole, trying to facilitate an environment where you are able to stem the chaos enough for enough normalcy that you can live in a relatively peaceful way. But once the woman and the man, because he promotes her in it, and it's his sin as much as hers, once a couple decides that they're going to operate in a contraceptive sense, then they've actually reversed the order of creation. Okay, and this is why we had the lockdown. That was a contraceptive act by society, because this is what contraception does to the mentality that adults have about children. You see, obviously we can abstain. Obviously not everybody has to get married. Not everyone's going to have children. That's totally fine. But you're working with nature to do that. You're not working against nature. You recognize that there's inherent sacrifice in the nature of existence itself, and that if you choose to do a particular activity, you will, by nature, have to participate in a sacrificial lifestyle in order to be in congruence with the way that you're created. It's a natural way to live. You'll have interior peace and tranquility of soul because you'll not be in a state of discord with your creator. But the mentality of contraception is that children are actually the last thing that's important. Okay. So when someone says, well, we're going to wait to have children because we want to travel after we get married and I want to finish my PhD and so on and so forth. What you're saying is my children or my potential children are the least important thing in my life. Because you always put the things that are most important to you first. Now, that doesn't mean you can't finish your PhD and have children. You can, obviously, come on, you can do anything and have your kids. So this is how, we got to this position as a society where we were able to say, we're going to, and I'm not even commenting on, don't worry, YouTube, we're not talking about whether or not illnesses are severe. But just a psychological framework we had to be in order to have lockdown as a society was a mentality that the elderly should be imprisoned for their own good, whether they want to or not. The young should sacrifice their futures through sacrificing their education, their sporting opportunities, their social engagement, development, and so forth, in order that those who are in the professional prime of their lives, i.e. people in their middle ages, can continue to operate as normal as possible. That's exactly what lockdown was. How do we get to a position where we have such a perverted and disordered and diabolical mindset about society? It's because we contracept. We've already made the decision collectively as a society that the needs of children and their existence itself will be secondary to the desires of those who have the ability to make decisions about who lives and dies, which is those who are in the state of power. So not the elderly, not the infirm, and not the young. And this is what C.S. Lewis, and I'll finish here in a sec, I promise it's a long rant, but C.S. Lewis illuminates this masterfully, more than anyone I've ever seen in Abolition of Man. And near the end of the book, he talks about how contraception is actually a form of eugenics, because what it is the primordial form of eugenics, because it is a decision made by those who are alive about who gets to live and when they get to live and how many of them get to live. It is as diabolical a concept as anything. So this is my long-winded way of saying, before you can even get to the point where you want to have an ordered family life and an ordered marriage, you have to stop living the lie of contraception, which is an affront against nature, and it's a rejection of the order of creation itself.
Yeah, it's an inversion. We should end like that from now on. No, it's an inversion of the natural hierarchy. You think about in the first couple of chapters of the scriptures, we have reality mediated to us in a certain order. It starts with God, through man to woman, right? Goes God, Adam, then Eve. When you're in that contraceptive mentality, you've flipped it. So it's woman dictates terms of relationship, man expected to submit, God afterthought, maybe, right? So it's the exact opposite, and that's why you have the disorder, because it's out of order. So it's not embracing the hierarchical structure that our Lord left for us, and wherein things function pretty well, if not darn near perfectly. And you've swapped it out for this mentality where literally the woman is in the place of God, or so it seems, right, for her own body, and the man is just allowing this to happen, right? So as you said, it's his sin as much as it is hers. And on that point, when the hierarchy is intact, when the man is exercising his leadership and the woman is faithfully exercising her followership, she's actually it's quite freeing for her to not have to be the man in the relationship, right? I don't know a lot of women that would actually say it in those terms, but from the outside looking in, right, I could say that of all of the acquaintances that we have, of all the friends and family, where there's this, I'll call it the world's normal, where there's the world's normal, you have women who are constrained because they're trying to act like men, you know, in a feminine way, but still they're trying to be the breadwinner. They're trying to do this. They're trying to make the long-term decisions for the good of their family. And when you have what isn't the world's normal, but what we know really ought to be, things function a lot more smoothly. And I'll notice, so instead of just saying everybody else is wrong, I'll turn it back on myself. When I fail to lead in my own household, that's when the tension starts. Yeah. Right. When I do not fail, but in fact exercise proper servant leadership, then everything seems to go really well. We don't always agree, my wife and I, but there's a certain peace. There's that. What's Augustine say? The tranquility of order, right? That comes along with this natural hierarchy when things are functioning as they ought, right? And then, Kennedy, while you were speaking, you were describing all of the different ways that society has embraced this contraceptive mentality. And it occurred to me that the reason why, you know, lives of traditional Catholics are so strange is because that seems normal. Yes. We know better. But everyone else is running their life in such a way, and they look at us or our kind of people, whether Catholic or not, because there are other Protestants who live like us, I suppose. Traditional lifestyles in general. To some degree. And they're like, wow, what's wrong with you guys? That's kind of weird. That's old fashioned. And it's like, well, you should give it a try. It's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah. And we should also say, like, so the Protestant and Catholic view of headship is different because, well, again, Protestantism has a disordered theology. And as a result, when you take out the aspect of sanctifying grace, Christianity makes no sense. This is why, they'll always say, and Tim, you can probably vouch for this, smart Protestants become Calvinists because it is like the most logical conclusion and the most well thought out formulaic system if you are to accept that Protestantism is true. Total depravity, predestination, all those sorts of things. That is the logical conclusion of, excuse me, of that. And then when it gets parodied, it obviously becomes once saved, always saved, etc. So when you take out the aspect of sanctifying grace, then you take out the opportunity, excuse me, you take out the opportunity to be sanctified. If you take out the opportunity to be sanctified, then you take out the progression of virtue that makes you a better human being over time and makes you a better leader and a better servant. But it also, when you reject the effect of original sin in the way it's properly understood, then what happens as a result is you begin to look at life without realizing that people have a fallen nature. So let's take something like modesty, for example. There's a reason why the church historically, and I mean, the last time popes talked about it really was with Pius the 12th and Pius the 11th, I think. We have I think Pius the 11th, it was a letter to the girls of Catholic Action or something like that. And it talked about like the norms of dress and like the neckline shouldn't be lower than two finger lengths under the pit of the throat, and the sleeves should be to the elbow or close to it or something like that. Obviously, these things can't be dogmatic insofar because, you know, body types and things change and tailoring and whatever. I get it, but there's a reason why he was talking about this. It is, and the reason why church is so insistent on modesty historically is not because there's an inherent badness to the female physique, not because there's an inherent unruliness or wildness to men that can't control themselves. It's that all of us can control ourselves at times and other times can't because we're fallen, and we understand this as Catholics. So we put guards in place to help each other, recognizing that we all suffer from the wounds of original sin and therefore all suck at life at certain moments, which is a fact. And because men and women are different, this manifests with different temptations. So when this comes to the difference between Protestantism and Catholicism, the reason why there was a feminist movement, in my opinion, that rose out of America is because the inherent understanding, the civic religion of America is really a Calvinist Puritanism, ultimately, historically. Mm-hmm. So you start to see these movements in the 1800s against what are bad laws. These weird conceptions of like women have no right to inherit and things like that. That's not Catholic. This is why, you know, that's not something that exists in Catholicism because it's stupid.
Yeah.
If you are a father and you have daughters, you give them your stuff if you want. If you know, like if father dies, mom is in charge. This is common sense. That always existed, and we understood that, but that was rejected in the Protestant framework. So then you have these reactions by these proto-feminists in the 1800s, who then say, well, because women have no equality under the law in our framework, we now need to put the equality of men and women in a legal sense into the writings of our states and so forth. And that is the beginning of the disaster, because it began with a disordered relationship. It began with disordered religion that went to disordered marital relationship that became disordered law. And it's something we've been reeling from ever since.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, Kennedy, because when you look at the history of feminism, this is what I talked about in my book. It's an overreaction to the evil of the Protestants smashing statues of the Virgin Mary. We're going all the way back to iconoclasm, because the Protestants destroyed the cult of the Virgin Mary, and they also objectified women as either as Luther ran this nun sex trafficking operation. I'm sorry to say that, but that's what he did because it's so disgusting. And Calvin and his Puritanism objectified woman as this just a pregnancy machine, basically.
Yes.
Which is also objectifying women as an object. And John Milton pushed for divorce because he wanted to marry his mistress in the 1600s. And it was all about destroying the cult of the Virgin Mary, and feminism is this reaction to it. But it's still diabolical. It's just like Marxism is an overreaction to poor people being oppressed. It's just taking one truth, and then the devil takes that and creates something out of it. I wanted to end, though, with practical steps. How do you actually do this? Because I really like what Prumer says in a handbook of moral theology. By the way, the Prumer reprint is coming soon. So to go to Sophia Institute Press, the reprint of Prumer, if you want a copy of this text is absolutely amazing. Handbook of Moral Theology by Dominic Prumer. The reprint is coming from Sophia Institute Press. But I think this is a really great practical thing to end with. So it talks about that man and woman have rights and duties. So first of all, some of these are mutual duties that there is sort of an equality. They both have this mutual duty. So they have mutual obligations. 1, mutual love, both effective and effective. You have to love each other mutually. Number 2, rendering the marital debt. That's St. Paul's words. That's a conjugal act. So that's a mutual thing that both are obligated to each other to render the conjugal act. Number 3 is life in common, mutual companionship. So they mutually must give to each other all these things. Now, after that, we have number 2, the husband has his own duties. Number 1, as head of the family, to guide his wife, children, and servants, if he happens to have servants. Number 2, to provide for his wife and family sufficient food, clothing, and maintenance. Ripperger adds that the man has the duty to make enough money so that the woman does not have to work. So the woman can just be a mom. Number 3, to administer the family property wisely. So your duty is to take care of all the finances and make sure everybody's taken care of. And as I said before, whatever's left over, you get to have that leftover. Now, number 3, the wife, her duties are to show due obedience to her husband. And number 2, to pay careful attention to the home and to the education of her children. Part of the problem is that we live in a post-industrialist society, whereas before, man and woman and children were all working on the family farm or in the family shop or whatever. They were all working together. And everybody the woman was working out of the home. And the man was working perhaps further from home, but still through the home. So since the post-industrialist society, there's such a separation because you're going to the factory and everything. But woman can and should work through the home in sort of in this home economy. But in the modern sense, when we have, if a woman is forced to go outside of the home, away from her children, far away from her children, that is a great burden that it is the husband's duty to alleviate. It's the husband's duty to make more money, get an extra job, get a third job, make more money so that your mom or your wife can be a mom. So I really like that because there's this proper balance between, there are certain mutual submissions in a sense, because we do have mutual duties that are totally equal. Nobody has more rights than others in these areas. But then we understand this hierarchy. So it is this proper hierarchy, which I think it does become natural if you just start with these duties. Hey, it's my duty to do these things. I have to take care of everybody. I have to be the head of the household. So let's offer up an Ave for especially to Our Lady. Ultimately, when Mary is the queen of your house, everything goes much better. And so I encourage everyone to enthrone Our Lady in your home, because she really provides the model. You can also meditate on the Holy Family. You can consecrate your family to the Holy Family. You can consecrate your marriage to Mary and Joseph, and to really practice these roles and be perfected in them. So make sure to check out Terror of Demons, read the book, practice it in your life. Men, it is your duty to die on the cross for your bride.
Real quick here, though. If you consecrate more than one of your children at the same time, is it valid? Sorry, that was a joke about the consecration. You can't consecrate your family. You have to do every individual member specifically and differently. Otherwise, it's not valid, by the way.
Okay, good to know. Thank you for. We'll put that out. I love the devotion to the Holy Family. We've really gotten more and more into it. 3 hearts and everything. So what was I saying about Terror of Demons? Oh yeah. Ultimately, men, you have to be dying on the cross for your woman first. It's your duty to first die on the cross before, if you come along and ask her to submit to you and you're an effeminate slob, that's not how it works. It's your job first to take care of yourself and take care of your wife and children, die on the cross. That's what comes first. So let's offer up an Ave, asking Our Lady to make us all men of God so that we can really be true heads of our families and take care of them as Christ does the church. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen.
Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.